Thank you so much, Mrs. Munoz Rosas, for that wonderful introduction. And I want to thank all of you who are viewing this presentation. I feel very honored. And so what I plan to do is to tell you a little bit about my story and then tell you why I write. And so I'll start from the very beginning. My story is not unique. It's the story of many families from the past and the present. And so I was born in San Pedro, Tlaquepaque, in the state of Jalisco. And when I was 4 years old, my parents decided to try to leave our poverty behind and start a new and better life. So we crossed the border without documentation, and we ended up in Santa Maria, California, as you see in this slide. And the first place we lived in Santa Maria was called Tent City. Tent City was a migrant camp owned by Sheehy Strawberry Farms. And Sheehy, the owner, parceled out acres of strawberries to Japanese sharecroppers. So we used to pick strawberries for Ito, a Japanese sharecropper. And the owner of the migrant camp, Sheehy, offered old army tents for living quarters for the residents. So the tent that you see there to your right is the tent that we lived in. The tall boy that you see there with the cap, that's my older brother, Roberto, who is like my second father. And in front of Roberto is my little brother, whom we call Trampita. And we called him Trampita because frequently my parents would go to the city dump, which was about a mile away from Tent City, to get things that we needed. And on one occasion, they found baby clothes in the city dump. They dressed Trampita in those clothes, and ever since then, we call him Trampita, Little Tramp. Pero Trampita me dice, Panchito, no me digas Trampita enfrente de las personas que saben español porque me da vergüenza. He says, don't call me Trampita in front of people who know Spanish because I get embarrassed. And so I tell Trampita, okay, Trampita. And the kid that you see there to your left, that's myself. My nickname is Panchito. And I'm wearing suspenders, and there's a story behind that wearing suspenders, which I'll tell you in a minute. In Santa Maria, we pick strawberries. And this picture was taken the year that I went to Santa Clara University, the first in the family to go to college. My mother was still picking strawberries. You can see her in the left wearing the big hat. And to your right is my little brother, Ruben. We used to call Ruben Carne Seca. We all had nicknames. I recall that when we were picking strawberries, sometimes dust planes would come, copper, what do you call it, planes that spray pesticides would spray the pesticides while we were picking strawberries. And sometimes they would fly so low that we would have to crouch even more down, so in order to avoid them. And after they would spray the pesticides, our eyes would burn for days, and any part of our body that was exposed would get red splashes. After the strawberry season would be over, we would go to the San Joaquin Valley to pick grapes, and around Fresno, Visalia, Modesto. And we picked grapes mostly for raisins. These are called Townsend seedless grapes. we would cut the grapes and spread them on these thick, large sheets of paper, like you see in this picture. We used to get 5 cents for each one of these units. And this next slide, you'll see what this row has been completely picked. And in the valley, it gets very, very hot in September. And so with the heat, dries the raisins on one side. And after they dry on one side, we would flip them over to the other side so they would dry on both sides. And that's how you get your raisins. After they would dry on both sides, we would wrap them on this paper so they would haul them away. And we used to get half a penny for doing that. Picking grapes was difficult because of the heat. And back then, we were not provided with drinking water or even toilets. So to relieve ourselves, we had to go away from the pickers and hide into some of the vineyards to relieve ourselves. This was very humiliating for me and my family, but especially for my mother. After the grape season would be over, we would go to another little town in the valley called Corcoran. And in Corcoran, we lived in one-room cabins like the one that you see here. These cabins were provided by the growers, cotton, who grew cotton. We picked cotton in Corcoran. And we lived in these one-room cabins like the ones that you see here. We had no indoor plumbing, no electricity. And during the cotton season in November and December, it gets very, very cold in the valley. So to keep warm, my family would have, we had one mattress for the whole family, where all of us would sleep in that mattress and we would cuddle up to keep warm. And as I mentioned earlier, we pick cotton in Corcoran. You can see the cotton fields in the background. My mother and Roberto in the middle, and myself making a bad face. And I'm making a bad face because I hated to wear suspenders. We used to use these cotton sacks to pick cotton, like the ones that you see here. This is a 12-foot long cotton sack, the kind that my father used. Roberto used one that was 10 feet long, and the one that I got eventually was 6 feet long. But as you can see from this picture, you would strap the cotton sack around your shoulder or wrap it around your leg, so the opening would be between the legs. And as you pick the cotton and you fill up the sack, and as you advance in the row, the cotton sack gets heavier and heavier and heavier. So you can imagine dragging the cotton sack behind you. It would cause a lot of back problems. We used to get 3 cents a pound, and working from all day from sun up to sundown, the most my father ever picked was 200 pounds. Roberto was a better picker than my father. The most he ever picked was 250. And Panchito, on the other hand, was not a good picker, I have to say. The most I ever picked was 100 pounds. This is what a cotton bulb looks like. For those of you who do not know what a cotton bulb looks like. And you notice that it has thorns. So when you pick the cotton, you have to be careful not to get scratched, but it was inevitable to get scratched by these horns and sometimes, or thorns, but sometimes they would go in between the fingernails and the hands would bleed. So in order to protect ourselves from being scratched with some farm workers would use adhesive tape and wrap it around their fingers, like you see in this paper and this picture. Um, After the cotton season was over, at the end of December, first part of January, we returned to Santa Maria to spend the winter months there. And we moved into another labor camp called Bonetti Ranch. And Bonetti, the owner of this migrant camp, took barracks from World War II and converted them for living quarters. So you can see one of the barracks there to your right. The barracks were nicer than the tents in Tent City because they had electricity and wooden floors. We had dirt floors in Tent City, but we didn't have any indoor plumbing. And so we had to use the outside toilet. And we could not drink the water because the water was contaminated. We had to leave Tent City. We couldn't return to Tent City because there was an epidemic that hit the migrant camp, and many of the children became very ill. My little brother Torito was one of those who got very sick. He had terrible diarrhea and convulsions. And since we didn't have health insurance, my parents decided to resort to a curandera, a healer who lived in the migrant camp. She came to our tent and tried to heal Torito with the knowledge of herbs that she knew. But Torito kept getting worse and worse and worse. So out of desperation, my parents finally took Torito to the county hospital in Santa Maria. And the doctor told my parents that Torito most probably not survive because we had taken so long to take him. So my parents brought back Torito to our home. And we as a family decided to make a manda to El Santo Niño de Atocha. And so we prayed every single day, hoping that Torito would survive. And eventually Torito got better and better and better, and he did survive. So in that incident in the circuit, I titled it Miracle in Tent City. And to this day, Torito is married and has children. He lives in Santa Maria, and we still call him the Miracle Child. The man that you see there to your right is Don Pancho, the man with the hat. Don Pancho, like my parents, did not have the opportunity to go to school. So he, like my parents, he never learned to read and to write. But like my parents, Don Pancho was highly intelligent, highly talented. He knew a large number of folk tales. So after work, we would sit around Don Pancho and listen to him tell us all these wonderful ghost stories and legends like La Leyenda de la Llorona. And I used to get very scared because he would dramatize some of these spooky folk tales. And when I was doing the research to write the book, I lamented the fact that I didn't have the opportunity to record all these wonderful folk tales that Don Pancho told us. Because if I had been able to do so and then transcribe them, and it would have been a bestseller. So Don Pancho to me represents many people in our communities, in the world, who are highly intelligent, highly talented, but for various reasons, mainly because of poverty, they are not able to go to school. They need to work to help to survive. But you can imagine how much healthier, how much better our societies, our communities would be if everyone would have the opportunity to go to school. Fortunately, Don Pancho was deported during a Border Patrol raid, and so I never saw him again. But I carry Don Pancho in my heart. And when you read my work, Don Pancho in some ways is also the author of my books because he sparked the idea of storytelling in my mind. And so you see my father there with the trampita on his lap. And during the winter months in Santa Maria, we used to pick what I call top carrots or pick carrots. We would dig them out of the ground, as you see in this photograph, and then top the green off the carrots, and then put the carrots in a burlap sack. And we used to get 15 cents a sack. What was terrible about topping carrots was that we used to top them after it rained or even when it was drizzling. So the the ground would get very, very muddy. And during the winter, it got very, very cold. So it was really a pretty nasty kind of work. We also thin lettuce with the short handle hoe, as you see here. This is not a family picture, but it gives you an idea of what thinning lettuce with a short handle hoe was like. It's stoop labor, and the handle, the short handle hoe, was outlawed or became illegal because so many migrant workers suffered from back problems from doing this kind of labor, including my father and my brother and myself. And so, when we used to get 15 cents an acre for thinning lettuce. My older brother and I had to work alongside our parents during the harvest season because during the winter months there was little or no work. So consequently, we had to miss a lot of school. I would start school for the first time in the second or third week in November, right before Thanksgiving. That's why Thanksgiving is still one of my favorite holidays, because as a child, that meant that I would go back to school. And Roberto, being the oldest in the family, did not start school every year until after the cotton season was over at the end of December, first part of January. So Roberto would miss half a year of school every single year. And the picture that you see here was taken in Santa Clara when we came to pick plums. The picture to the right, you see Roberto carrying trampita in the bucket, and with the buckets that we use for picking plums. And Roberto is giving trampita a ride in the bucket. And I used to say to Roberto, I used to call him Toto because I couldn't pronounce the name Roberto. So I called him Toto. And I used to say, Toto, ¿por qué no me paseas en el balde? And he would say to me, no, Panchito, porque tú eres demasiado pesado. Why don't you give me a ride in the bucket? And my brother would say, no, because you're too heavy. And the word for heavy in Spanish is pesado. And pesado has two meanings. Pesado means physically heavy, but it also means someone who is annoying. No seas pesado, he would say to me. And I was quite annoying. Pobrecito de Roberto. And the picture to your left, that's me. I am happy because I filled my bucket with plums, and I had dressed Trampita with clean clothes. One of the things that I used to do in order not to fall so far behind my classes when I would start school in the second or third week in November, is that I used to carry a little notepad in my shirt pocket. And every day I would add a different word in its definition in order to improve my English vocabulary. I also used to write other things that I needed to learn for school. And so in one of the places we lived in Orosi, another migrant camp, the place we lived in burned down completely, and we lost a few things that we owned. And I was terribly upset and crying because I had lost my little pad in that fire. And my mother, being the wise and caring and loving mother that she was, she said to me, Panchito, I know you're upset, but we should be thankful to God that no one was hurt in the fire. But I said, Mama, pero he perdido mi libretita. I lost my little notepad. So she looked me straight in the eye and she asked me the question, well, Panchito, do you recall what you wrote in your libretita? And I thought about it and I said, yes, I remember. And she said to me, well, Panchito, not everything is lost. And I thought about what she meant, and I realized that she was absolutely right. That whatever I learned on my own, using the little libretita, and whatever I learned in school, that knowledge would go with me wherever we went. So in this very, very unstable life that we were living, as a child, I learned for stability, for a place to call our own. I was tired of moving. I was tired of missing school. And so where I found the sense of stability, of permanence, was in learning. So it's not surprising that I value education tremendously and became a teacher. This is when I was in the 8th grade, I was attending El Camino Junior High. My father couldn't continue working in the fields because he had severe back problems. So Roberto and I got janitorial jobs to help support our family. So I was at El Camino Junior High, and I had two wonderful teachers, Mr. Milo, who taught me math and science, and Mrs. Salas to your right, who taught me English and social studies. And so one day, one morning, while we were in class, there was a knock at the door. Mrs. Salas went to open the door, and in walks the principal of the school and a Border Patrol officer. And when I saw the green uniform, I panicked. I wish that my name was not Francisco Jiménez at that moment, that I was somebody else, because I knew that he was coming to get me. Mrs. Salas pointed me out, and then the Border Patrol officer took me out of the classroom, put me in the Border Patrol car, drove down Broadway to Santa Maria High School, where Roberto was attending school, and picked him up. And then they drove us to Bonetti Ranch, where other Border Patrol officers had apprehended other undocumented families, including my own. So we got deported back to Mexico. So this is basically what I talk about in the circuit, stories from the life of a migrant child. I relate the stories from the child's point of view with the hope of having it been accessible to both children and adults, and that has been the case. The book is read at the elementary school, middle school, high school, college, and even college preparation programs. The picture that you see there behind, that you see there in the book, in the cover of the book, was taken in Corcoran, and the trailer behind me was a trailer used by another migrant family. They used it to carry their belongings as they moved from place to place. And underneath that shirt, I'm wearing suspenders. I figured how to hide my suspenders. I just put my shirt over them. The book has been published. I published it originally with the title Cajas de Cartón, Relatos de la Vida Peregrina de un Niño Campesino. And the reason I titled it Cajas de Cartón is because the few things that we own, we used to pack in cardboard boxes as we moved from migrant camp to migrant camp. And from a literary point of view, cardboard boxes, cajas de cartón, symbolize the kind of the kind of life that we were living and other migrant families were living. Cardboard boxes are very unstable. They can collapse very easily. Like a migrant family's life is also very, very unstable, very insecure financially. The book has been published in Korean, in Italian, in Chinese. The little guy that you see there is supposed to be me. It's also in Japanese, and it's also in Persian. And this is the picture, the cover of the sequel to the circuit. It begins where the circuit ends with our being deported and then coming back with documentation and settling permanently in Bonetti Ranch. Thanks to Ito, the Japanese sharecropper, who sponsored us and loaned us money so that we could come back after we got to fix our papers in the other side of the border, and so we could come back with documentation. And breaking through refers to the 4 years that I was in high school, how I was able to break through some of the obstacles that I experienced while going to high school, having to work 30 to 35 hours a week while I was going to school as a janitor to help support our family, and how I was still having some difficulty with the English language. And as a matter of fact, I should have mentioned earlier, I failed first grade because I did not know English well enough. I had to repeat it. And so I talk about some of those difficulties that I had in high school. And thanks to some of the teachers there, I was able to make progress. I also talk about how I navigated between two worlds, my traditional Mexican world and my new American world, and how I took the best of both worlds and make them my own. So I talk about that in this book. And I published it in Spanish with the title Senderos Fronterizos. It's in Japanese. And this is the third in the book in the series. I'm sorry. It's titled Reaching Out. In this book, I describe my experiences in college, the first member of the family to go to college at Santa Clara. I was the first one to go to college, and I went to Santa Clara University. And the picture that you see there is the picture that appears in my naturalization papers. I became an American citizen when I was a junior in college. And one of the things that I talk about in this book, besides the obstacles that I encountered my freshman year, was that I joined Cesar Chavez on that march to Sacramento in 1966. I was a senior in college, and I joined him on that march. And when we arrived to the Capitol, it was Easter Sunday, and I heard Cesar Chavez talk about social justice, and he thanked all the people who joined him in the march for the sacrifices they made in order to help and form a farm workers union. And he continued talking and saying how important it is for people to devote their energies, their talents to make a better life for others. And so when I listened to him talk about sacrificing oneself for others, I looked at the banner of La Virgen de Guadalupe that was behind him. And at that moment, I made a promise that I would do everything in my life to help alleviate the plight of farm workers. I had no idea how I was going to do that, but I made that promise. I published a book in Spanish with the title Masayadami, and this is the fourth in the series, Taking Hold from Migrant Childhood to Columbia University. In this book, I talk about meeting Andres Duarte, my professor at Columbia, who encouraged me to write my story. After we became very close, and I showed in some of my writings that I had done when I was a freshman in college. And so as I began to write my family's story, Cajas de Cartón, I immediately realized that my story was not unique, that it was the story of many families like my own. And so that gave me the impetus to continue writing, because I wanted to document part of my family's history, but more important, I wanted to document the experiences of many families from the past and the present who work very, very hard from sunup to sundown for low wages, sometimes living in poor living conditions. And thanks to their hard and noble work, and their work is noble, thanks to their noble work, all of us can enjoy our fruits and vegetables every day. And what sustains these families day in and day out is a hope and dream of having a better life for their children and their children's children. So these families, some of your families, are an inspiration to me and to my writing. And so this is why I write. I wanted to document the part of the migrant experience is an important and integral part of the American experience. It is part of this country's history. And for the most part, this wonderful community is not included in literature. And so I wanted to pay tribute to these families, to my families, by writing about them. And one of the themes that runs across all four books is the power of education, the transformative power of education, how education helped me break the migrant circuit, the poverty. And for those young people who are listening to my presentation, I encourage you to keep working hard at your studies. And you know what hard work is, because you see your parents, your families working hard for you so you can go to school. And so by working hard in your studies, you're honoring the sacrifices that your parents and abuelitos have made so you can have a better life. And also by applying yourself and getting a good education, you'll be able to make choices of the kind of life, the kind of work that you want to do and the kind of life that you want to live. You see, my parents didn't have a formal education. They were very intelligent, but because they didn't have formal education, their choice of work was limited. They work in the fields, and working in the fields, as I said earlier, is noble work. All work is noble, and we should respect and value it. But when you have a good education, you have the choices. You can make choices. I'm sure that if my parents had been able to go to school and were able to get a good education, they would have made a different choice of the kind of work that they did, because working in farm work is very, very hard. And so, and as I mentioned earlier, your education will serve you for the rest of your life. No one can take it away from you. It's yours to have and to hold. So I would encourage then all of us to tell our own stories, to tell our stories, and to share them with others. Because when we tell our stories and we share them with others, we make connections. And when we make connections, we begin to break down those walls that separate us from one another. And we see ourselves reflected in the other, and we can take comfort and we can rejoice in the fact that we're all members of the same family, the human family. So, so please tell your stories. For the young people who are listening to me, talk to your parents, your grandparents, and ask them about their stories, their childhood, what they went through, and so on and so forth. And then in school, share those with your classmates. I would like to end by quoting one of the writers, and she says, quote, "If you don't recount your family history, it will be lost. Honor your own stories and tell them too. The tales may not seem very important, but they are what binds families and makes each of us who we are." So I'll stop there, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much for those inspiring words. I truly admire your tenacity, las fuerzas, la gana y la humildad que tiene para transferir estas historias. Really, I'm choking here. Quiero llorar.
Gracias a usted. Estaba pensando, durante la presentación, estaba pensando en su propia familia.
Sí, y sabe que antes de compartir algo de mí, quiero decir que tenemos bastantes participantes aquí en Zoom y muchos también en Facebook. So, quiero hacer una de las preguntas que me están diciendo, pero tenemos personas de Butte County, tenemos personas de Santa María, tenemos personas de aquí de la Bay Area, and we have all kinds of last names and colors in the audience. So it's a rainbow of attendees. I'm loving it. Me está encantando. Que tiene, más que todo lo están, they are thanking you for being so brave to share your story. And we have a couple of questions. Okay. One of them is like, we love your latest book. When can we expect the new one? Do you have any plans? ¿Tiene algunos planes para un libro próximo?
Acabo de traducir el último libro al español.
Taking Hold.
Mm-hmm. El título que le di es Pasos Firmes. y se va a publicar por Houghton Mifflin en 2022.
22. ¿Y también estará disponible como ebook, como libro electrónico?
Sí, como
sí,
libro
también.
electrónico. Y también Houghton Mifflin va a publicar una versión, a graphic novel of the circuit.
¡Wow! That's gonna be a bestseller. Los chicos del día de hoy les encantan los graphic novels, los cómics. Y eso aún lo hace más adaptable para los chicos que they're reluctant readers, tal vez no quieren leer y son más, aprenden más visualmente. So, qué bueno, qué bueno. Otra pregunta dice aquí, pero creo que ya lo respondió, dice que si todos sus hermanos y hermanas tienen sobrenombres, nicknames, excepto Roberto, dice, porque, because I guess in your name, you name him Roberto, and he doesn't get a nickname.
No, I call him Toto.
Toto.
Yeah, and then Ruben is carne seca, and my sister is La Rorra. Rorra means doll, and yeah, we all
And
have
Trampita, and you Panchito.
yeah, Trampita and Panchito, and yeah, we all have nicknames. Es muy común en la cultura mexicana.
Yeah, those are terms of endearment. It's all about showing love.
That's right.
Right?
Exactly.
Y creo que as somebody says, you mentioned about your suspenders. Why you didn't like them? ¿Por qué no le gustaban sus tirantes?
Because I wanted to be dressed like my dad, and my father didn't wear suspenders. But my mother insisted that I wear them. Decía mi mamá, si no llevas tirantes, Panchito, se te vayan a caer los pantalones. If you don't wear suspenders, you would keep your pants up. And she was right, because she would, whenever she could afford to buy us new clothes, she would buy us clothes that were 2 or 3 sizes larger, and she would say, see, that this way they'll last you a long time. If I buy you clothes that fit perfectly well, then it won't last you very long. So consequently, I had to wear suspenders. Yeah.
Y usted ha hablado, también ahorita habló de los maestros y los profesores
Sí.
y del rol que tiene el escribir nuestras historias. You know, journaling for kids may be something new, or writing their own stories, but I know that, you know, teachers are essential workers, but they are also essential in the role of children.
Yes.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about the role of your teachers?
Absolutely. I have the greatest respect, gratitude, and admiration for teachers, because without teachers, I wouldn't have succeeded. Thanks to them, I was able to make progress in my studies. I mentioned one of them in the circuit. When I was in the 6th grade, I had Mr. Lema, who during his lunch hours, he would help me with my English. And then when I was in high school, I had Mrs. Bell, who was a very strict teacher, very excellent teacher, who encouraged me, or encouraged our class to write things that we had experienced. And so she gave me the book, The Grapes of Wrath, to read by John Steinbeck. And you know, and then she also read one of my essays that I wrote for her based on the experience with Trampita. And she said to me, she returned my paper, and it was full of grammatical corrections. But she said, Francisco, if you're able to work as hard as you have been working, and you're going to continue to make progress, and you're going to succeed. And then she said, you have writing talent. And so she planted the seed in my mind that perhaps someday I would be able to write those stories. So I owe a lot to my teachers. And it's a wonderful profession. I tell students that the teachers are a gift to our society, because they decided to devote their entire professional life to making a difference in our life, in our society. And so, yeah, that teachers are essential. You're right.
Somebody else writes over here, as a teacher, what advice would you give to teachers in how to keep their students inspired? And I know you mentioned, you know, que usted es su maestra, lo inspiró al hablarle y en confiarle en believing in your talent, expresarlo, oralmente, that, human connection. What other advice would you give, especially right now that it's all virtual learning, para los maestros, cómo inspiren más a sus estudiantes?
Bueno, una recomendación que siempre he hecho a los maestros es que utilicen materiales que corresponden o pudieran corresponder a las experiencias y las culturas de los estudiantes, para que los estudiantes se vean reflejados en la lectura. So my recommendation, I have for many years been a proponent of bilingual education, and also of including or developing curriculum that is inclusive, that reflects the diversity of students that exist in our classrooms, that no one is left out, so that when a child sees himself or herself reflected in the literature that they're reading, they become much more engaged in reading, and they feel wanted. They feel that their culture, their experiences are validated. And so when they don't see themselves in the curriculum, they see themselves. They don't see themselves. They become invisible, and they tune out. You see?
Yes.
Yeah, so
I think está usted en todo lo correcto. Si la literatura representa al lector y ellos forman esta conexión, tienen más interés en la lectura. Hace unos años estaba una campaña que se llamaba We Need Diverse Books, necesitamos libros diversos.
Yes.
And I have to say, I graduated a few years from college, but the first time I actually got introduced to Chicano, Mexican American, or just Latino literature was in college. En el colegio, ya estaba vieja. But that, I read Rincultura. I mean, all those things kept me, from going, like, they were my steadiness. They kept me through going to college. Y yo creo que eso también es para los chicos desde pequeños, desde los libros de fotos ilustrados. Alguien pregunta, dice, tengo una niña de 7 años. ¿Ha pensado usted en escribir un libro de ficción para los niños más pequeños? Y la niña pregunta, ¿cuál es su comida favorita? And then she asks, what's your favorite food too?
Carne con chile de puerco.
Carne con chile. Le iba a mencionar que tenemos el picture book.
Es para los niños, la mariposa, y también the Christmas gift, el regalo de Navidad.
Christmas gift.
It's also bilingual for children.
So, déjeme ver qué más dice. Tengo varias preguntas aquí, perdíme un minuto. Oh my goodness. Wow. Tenemos varias preguntas aquí. Déjeme ver cuál es Y dice, yo soy una maestra de 5º grado. Tengo en el programa de bilingüe, Dual Immersion Teacher 5th grade. Love reading your book. My question is, was it hard for you to get over the experience of crossing the border? And I guess la experiencia de inmigrar.
Sí. ¿En español o en inglés?
The question is bilingual, so you can do whatever.
No, lo voy a decir en inglés, en español si quieren también. When we crossed the border without documentation, obviously we had to hide the fact that we were here without documentation. So as a child, I was always uncomfortable in school, and I could never feel at ease because I was always afraid of revealing that I wasn't here with documentation. It's very stressful to have that kind of feeling throughout your childhood. And so when we got deported, and it was a traumatic experience. And when we came back with documentation, I continued to tell people that I was born. It was so ingrained in me that I never told people that I was born in Mexico. And the first person I told that I confessed to it, that I was born in Mexico was my girlfriend in college, who became my wife, Laura.
Oh, wow.
And once I told her, she says, "So what?" You know, she was extremely grateful about accepting that. And so now I feel that, I don't have that problem. And Roberto had felt the same way. And when I was interviewing him for the book, he said, "Ay, Panchito, forget about those experiences. Forget about them. They're too painful. I don't want to talk about them." And so I convinced him to talk about them. I said, "It's not just mine or yours. It's a lot of people's experiences." Mm-hmm. So he agreed to do it. When the book came out and was published, he wrote me what I consider the most valuable reward that I have received. He wrote me a letter. And he said, "Thank you, Panchito, for writing this book. Now I feel liberated." Yeah.
El poder de las palabras.
Yeah. Ya no tenía que escribir. He didn't have to write it anymore, you know. Yeah. And
it's freeing.
Yeah, and children, the other thing about children who come from humble backgrounds and go to school, they should be proud of their parents and the work that they do. They should not feel ashamed, or made to feel that way by teachers or students. Yeah. It's so important to validate their experience.
Yeah. Their experience as a whole, their culture, their language as a whole, that makes us a person.
That's right. And to share it.
Somebody says over here. Go ahead. We have somebody that says over here, I'm a retired teacher. Your book was required for the Mexican American Studies class. And now as a retired teacher, I have to say it helped me understand my Mexican students and their families. Oh. Otherwise, I would have never understand them. What a wonderful hard work you have done, and their work has often been misunderstood. And he said their dreams continue to live on in their children still today.
What a beautiful thing to say. Thank you so much, teacher. I mean, you touched many lives in your tenure as a teacher. So thank you for being a teacher.
And María Padilla dice aquí, Francisco, ¿puede mandarle saludos a Moisés y Erika Ramírez en Sacramento? They are reading your books during quarantine and they have become great fans of your work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So I think, we have many more. They keep popping. So I'm trying to select a few of them. I was gonna ask you about your experiences. We have a lot of bilingual teachers here in the audience. Uh-huh. And I know that you serve, during, I believe it was Jerry Brown who asked you to serve. So can you tell us about the importance of being bilingual and how you think all these teachers that are here can...
Yes, when Jerry Brown, during his first term as governor, appointed me to the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and that is the agency that sets the standards for credentialing teachers and administrators in the state of California. And when I came on that commission, one of the tasks of the commission was to set the standards for certifying bilingual teachers. And I was always a proponent of bilingual education. And so I served on that commission for 10 years and 2 years as chair. And so, I hope that I was able to contribute to the efforts of setting standards and encouraging young people to go into education, especially bilingual teachers. They're so needed because, as you know, there are many children who come into our school system not knowing English. And so it's so important for teachers to value the child's native language and culture while they're learning English. And hopefully the children can maintain their native language and become bilingual, because in our society, being bilingual is so important, you know. Como dice el dicho, la persona bilingüe vale por dos. Yeah.
I'm going to read a few of the comments. And if anybody else is in Zoom or Facebook, feel free to put your comments. I'm trying to check both. Si alguien está en Facebook y aquí en Zoom y quieren poner sus preguntas, voy a tratar de llegar a algunas de ellas, pero téngame paciencia. It's a lot of them. So, déjenme me fijo aquí en esta otra área. Dice, saludos desde el sur de San José. Aquí estoy, Steve and Donna. We certainly enjoy meeting you in person at the History of San Jose a few years ago. So you have a lot of fans. So only I'm like, oh my goodness, a lot of. Okay, I'm gonna ask you one more thing. When you in one of your books you talk about going to college for the first one in your family, de ir al colegio, el que tuvo que sacrificar, dejar la familia. So how is it that you were able to manage, like you say, the best of the two worlds? You know, how do you form that balance? Do you have like a special counselor or a special meditating? I don't know.
No. My father always insisted that we be proud of our heritage, to be proud of being Mexican. And as you can tell by looking at me, I had one friend that, when I was a custodian, said to me, "Ay, Francisco, you should tell people that you were born here because tú eres güero. You know, you can pass for an Anglo." And I said, no, I'm proud of who I am. And so one of the things that I cherish about my Mexican culture, one of the many things, is the value of respect, respect for oneself and for others, the value of family, the value of hope, and the value of faith. My mother used to say, "Panchito, I'm sorry I can't give you the things that you need, but I can give you the importance of values. If you the value of respect, the value of hope, and the value of faith. And she would say, if we lose our hope, if we lose our respect, and if we lose our faith, mijo, ¿qué nos queda? A television set, So she was absolutely right. So those are what I don't. The thing that I rejected on my new American culture was the overemphasis on individualism, because in Mexican culture we value community, and whatever I do affects all of us. And so in America, the overemphasis on individualism taken to an extreme can be very harmful, because people will say, I'll get ahead no matter how I'm going to do it, even if I have to step on people. And that is so harmful to our society. And I'm hoping that one of the gifts that our culture and other cultures have given to our country is the gift of valuing community and being responsible for one's family and for one's community. That whatever we do as an individual has to be done with the view of helping our family, our community, our nation, and our world, because we're all members of the same family ultimately, right? Yeah. So what hurts me hurts others, and vice versa. So that's
we're all interconnected over here.
Yes.
I have a couple of comments here from Veronica. It says, I have my 4-year-old and my 2-year-old reading Cajas de Cartón with me. We love Panchito and Roberto.
I love her family. As a matter of fact, I had the privilege of being their godparents for their wedding.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, she's
and Dolores M. says, do you ever collect pennies again?
Yes, I do have the collection. I continue collecting them, yes.
Somebody else adds, I'm loving this presentation. And I want to add a little bit about the power of storytelling, like you were mentioning, cuando perdemos la fe, cuando perdemos la esperanza, cuando perdemos todo eso, como le dijo su mamá, ¿qué nos queda? La televisión.
Sí.
A mí también mi padre, de la misma manera, mis abuelos también eran analfabetos, no saben leer, escribir, ni en inglés, ni en español, ni cualquier otro lenguaje. Pero siempre como Don Pancho, the power of storytelling. Yes. I love to tell stories and I love listening to stories. So, cuando me estaba diciendo eso, digo, mi papá siempre así decía, no te puedo dejar dinero, but I can share with you my knowledge, the things that I have learned from my parents. Yeah. And it's just a bond. Yes, I knew my parents' limitations, pero me encantaba ese momento especial con los padres. And I think, what you're mentioning, just sharing your stories with your children, taking a minute, to talk to them is invaluable.
That's right. And record them. Now we have recorders, we have videotapes, you can tape them. Yeah, they're wonderful. Pass them on.
Dice over here, dice, quieren que tenga más presentaciones, pero en persona. More presentations face to face.
I love that.
Cuando se pueda.
I love that opportunity because, as I mentioned earlier, I like to hug people. I like to be in touch, look at them, and see their faces, their beautiful faces.
Una de las personas me está diciendo, una de mi abuela dice, sabía leer y sabía leer prayer books. Sí, una de mis abuelas sí sabía leer y solamente le encantaba leer el rosario,
sí,
que era el tiempo con la familia.
Ajá.
Sí, es cierto. A veces eso es lo que motivaba a los padres a saber, aprender a leer.
Sí, es cierto, sí, es cierto.
And let me see, I have another one. Dice, thank you, Dr. Jiménez, for writing about your experience. I am sure it wasn't easy. I love your style, how you bring your family members in such honorable way. Like others said before, you have opened my eyes. God bless.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Let me see. What is our time, Dr. Jiménez? Que ya nos pasamos de la hora.
My time is your time.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm going to check really quick on Facebook. Quiero ver a ver si alguien, porque no he chequeado, pero tenía otra pregunta que alguien me había mandado de anticipación.
Sí.
Dice que ¿qué se siente ser el primer mexicano que ha recibido el Dice la galardonia de John Steinbeck. ¿Nos puede decir acerca de ese premio que le dieron? I'm not sure if the viewers are familiar with that award that they gave you.
Yeah. Well, I felt very honored when I received the John Steinbeck Award, and it's given to writers, playwrights, musicians whose work voices the serve as voices for people or groups of people who have been on the margins, who have been neglected. So I felt very honored when I got the John Steinbeck Award. The first one who received it was Springsteen. Do you know the singer? Because of the lyrics, it talks about the working class families and so forth. And then Dolores Huerta received it as well. So yeah, it was a very nice thing to read, and it's meaningful to me because in the second book that when I talk about being in high school and having Mrs. Bell, my English teacher, who said to me, "You have writing talent," and who introduced me to The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, it kind of, I thought, wow, I would never, when I was in her class, never in my imagination could I've ever dreamed that I would get an award named after this book that made a difference in my life, you know. Yeah, it was wonderful. Yeah.
Y que le costó tanto leer because, you know, it's a thick book. Es un libro.
Yeah, it's a thick book. I thought, oh my God, when am I going to get through it? But you know, the importance of that book was that for the first time, I was able to relate to something that I was reading. The Joad family, as you know, didn't speak Spanish, but they were migrant workers. They left Oklahoma and they came to California. And then they were discriminated against because they were Okies. They call them the white Okies. Mm-hmm. And I said, my God, those are a similar experience to my family. So I thought, you know, my story, our story is part of the American story, and it should be told, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Creo que eso es lo correcto, you know, the American story, you know, we have been part of this beautiful nation and our stories are, you know, intertwined.
Yes.
And they are, like I said, you know, when I was introduced to Chicano literature, I was amazed. I was like, yes, wow, exactly. Somebody has the same last name as me, you know, you know. It was so powerful, and that's also one of the main reasons why I became a librarian, because I fell in love with books. Me encantaron los libros y de ahí me inspiré y aquí estamos, you know.
I love libraries. Whenever I go to a different town or city or visit the university for the first time, the first thing I do is go to the library, because the libraries tells you a lot of what that community values and what the universities value. And I spent numerous hours in libraries. I just when teaching at Santa Clara, when I wanted to take a break from teaching, or you know, after my classes or after meetings, I would go to the library. It was my refuge.
Refuge. That's the word, the refuge. Alguien pregunta en Facebook, are you in touch with anyone from when you were in college?
Yes. When I was in college, Smokey Murphy, who was my roommate, I'm still in touch with him. He's retired. He became a teacher. He lives in Sacramento with his wife. Mm-hmm.
Let me see over here. Another one says...
And the other one is Emily Bernabe, or Corpus.
Corpus. Oh, I know Emily.
Yeah, I keep in touch with her and her husband and her children. You know that Emily's son is the editor-in-chief of the Spartan, the Sunday,
really?
yes, where you graduated from.
Wow.
Yeah.
From State. Oh, wow. Small world.
Yeah.
El mundo es muy pequeño.
Yeah.
Alguien dice, wow, just amazing. What a reminder that every family, every people group has a history. The migrant experience is an integral part of our country, and education helps us break the cycle of poverty.
Yes.
Thank you, Professor Jiménez.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Wonderful. There's so many beautiful comments. I can send them. I'm trying. I'm trying to get, let's see. And somebody says, I want to keep a record of this presentation. Can I have a record of this? And they keep going on and on. It's a lot of comments. But I know we're over time. It's 3:13. I don't know if you have one last message that you want to send out, algún mensaje final que quiere dar a nuestra comunidad en estos tiempos tan difíciles, económicamente, socialmente. If you want to send a message to the community out there, and now that we're, during these trying times, economically, socially, as a nation, as a group, the border.
Yes. Well, going through this epidemic, it's really painful. But if we see anything that's might come good out of it, is the fact that we begin to see how important essential workers are in our lives. Mm-hmm. The farm workers, the mailmen, the janitors, all the people, the doctors, the nurses, all the essential workers who many times we take them for granted. Mm-hmm. And so I think we should all reflect on how important every individual is in our society, and we should, again, repeating myself, value and respect every kind of job that exists in our society, and then we should all, because we all are interconnected, as you said, we should all try to be try to be much more compassionate, more understanding towards each other, more appreciative of our differences, respect our differences, and realize that our differences is what enriches our lives. And so embrace those differences and make them part of our own. And try to be, more gentle, more respectful, more loving towards each other, and during these very difficult times. And even when we're not going through difficult times, we should treat each other with respect and gratitude. So I thank all your viewers and it's a wonderful comments. Writers do not exist without readers. So your comments really touched my heart, and I thank all of you for joining me. And I thank you especially, Elizabeth, for being so gracious, so understanding, and for your wonderful remarks, and for giving me the opportunity, you and Mrs. Young, for giving me the opportunity to make this presentation. So God bless all of you, and take care, stay safe.
Gracias. ¿Quiere decir algunas palabras en español o quiere que yo lo traduzca?
No, yo se las puedo decir en español. Quisiera darle las gracias a toda nuestra comunidad latina por el trabajo noble que hacen todos los días. Y para mí, nuestra comunidad inspira mis escritos. Es decir, les agradezco de todo corazón los sacrificios que ustedes están haciendo para que sus hijos y los hijos de sus hijos tengan una mejor vida. Es el mejor regalo que uno les puede dar a nuestros hijos, ¿verdad?
Bueno, yo realmente para mí su literatura ha sido transformativa personalmente, también en mi trabajo, me encanta compartir.
Gracias.
Y ahora que especialmente que sus libros son tan flexibles, y ahora que va a venir el graphic novel, aún mejor. Aún mejor, sus libros vuelan de nuestras bibliotecas. Yo también, cuando primero vine a los Estados Unidos, la biblioteca fue mi refugio.
Ajá.
Y mi primera tarjeta de biblioteca todavía la tengo porque cambió mi vida. Y creo que, como usted dice, el estudio es transformativo,
Sí,
el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz, el respeto uno al otro en estos tiempos tan difíciles. But I think overall, you know, las ganas that you have had, you know, to be able to overcome obstacles.
Well, with a lot of help.
Sí, la humildad que tiene, right? We don't get there by ourselves. Siempre.
We need each other. We need each other. That's right, to get ahead.
Exactly. Y la perseverancia, y pues es un ejemplo vivo. You're a living example that sí se puede.
Sí se puede. Gracias.
Bueno, si no tiene, oh my goodness, más comentarios, pero después se los mando porque no creo que pueda. Me llegaron otros 20. No creo que pueda. Son bastantes. Vamos a terminar con esto que dice aquí, sending you lots of love your way, Dr. Jiménez. Me ha encantado la presentación, está fenomenal, tantos años, you know, qué bonita fluidez, qué bonita enseñanza a los niños. Oh, there's lots of beautiful comments. I don't want to make you cry. No lo quiero dejar llorando. Me van a regañar. They're going to tell me you left the author crying. Well, everyone, gracias a todos. Thank you, everyone on Facebook and Zoom. Gracias por venir a apoyar a la biblioteca. Yes, continue checking out his books. Sigan sacando libros. Los libros de Dr. Jiménez están disponibles. They're available in audio, ebook, Spanish, English. You saw it. La literatura. My colleague Kelly, should we end right now? I think she says yes.